The story opens in Woodsboro, where a couple named Scott and Madison check into a unique rental, the former residence of Stu Macher. The house has now been converted into a Ghostface-themed Airbnb, built around the infamous murders linked to Stu Macher and Billy Loomis, along with the later killings connected to Amber Freeman and Richie Kirsch. Once inside, it quickly becomes evident that Scott is a devoted horror fan who finds the place incredibly exciting. Meanwhile, Madison feels uneasy almost immediately, and the unsettling atmosphere is made worse by the eerie artwork and disturbing decorations spread throughout the house. Despite her discomfort, Scott is completely thrilled by the experience, admiring every detail of the home, especially the chilling paintings and the markings on the floor that reference the house's dark history. Moments later, Madison steps out of the restroom, only to realize that Scott has suddenly disappeared. Growing anxious, she searches around the apartment until she suddenly comes face to face with a Ghostface figure holding a knife. Terrified, she immediately runs toward the exit, where she bumps into Scott and urgently tells him what she just saw. Instead of panicking, Scott decides to investigate for himself. When he checks the area, he discovers that the attacker is actually a life-sized robotic display equipped with motion sensors, designed to scare guests staying in the themed house. While Madison is clearly shaken, Scott finds the setup fascinating and even admits he has long been intrigued by Stu's role in the original killings. Madison, however, is far from amused, especially when Scott begins entertaining the idea that Stu might still be alive, something she finds both disturbing and unsettling. As they continue exploring the apartment, Scott and Madison suddenly receive a call from the property's host, who begins quizzing them with horror movie trivia. Following the classic Ghostface tradition, Scott confidently takes the lead, believing he is more than prepared for the challenge. He is given 3 questions and told the rules are simple: answer correctly and survive, but make a mistake and the consequences will be deadly. Scott successfully answers 2 questions and is convinced he got the 3rd one right as well. However, the caller coldly informs him that his final answer is incorrect. Fortunately, Madison steps in and provides the correct response, briefly saving the situation. Not long after, Madison receives another call, this time directly to her phone, with a distorted voice threatening her life. Assuming it is just Scott playing a prank, she tries to brush it off. However, her fear begins to return as she once again approaches the motion sensor Ghostface display. Just as she starts to relax, another Ghostface suddenly appears behind her. Acting on instinct, Madison throws a punch, only to realize she has hit Scott, who had put on a Ghostface costume as a joke. But the moment quickly turns serious when Scott notices something unusual. The figure behind Madison moves differently from the robotic display. As he cautiously steps closer, the real attacker reveals himself. In a brutal instant, Ghostface lunges forward, stabbing Scott twice in the chest before delivering a final, fatal blow. Panicked and desperate, Madison rushes upstairs, screaming for help as Ghostface chases close behind. After a long and intense struggle, she manages to fight back and shove the attacker over the ledge. For a brief moment, it seems like she might escape. But while desperately clinging to the house's chandelier to keep from falling, tragedy strikes. She loses her grip and lands directly onto the killer's knife. With Madison defeated, Ghostface wastes no time. The attacker pours gasoline throughout the house, soaking both Madison and the surrounding rooms before igniting the fuel, setting the entire building ablaze and erasing the scene in flames. Later, the story shifts to Pine Grove, Indiana, where a girl named Tatum is visited by her boyfriend, Ben Brown. As they spend time together, they are interrupted by Tatum's mother, Sidney Prescott, who clearly struggles to trust her daughter's boyfriend, and for good reason, given her past. Sidney tells Ben to leave the house. At this moment, when Sidney returns to her room, we learn that she has worked hard to leave the horrors of Woodsboro behind, attempting to build a quieter life with Tatum and her husband, Officer Mark Evans. The following morning, Mark prepares to head to work while Tatum gets ready for school. As she is about to leave, Sidney notices the jacket Tatum plans to wear and immediately asks her to take it off, clearly unsettled by something about it. After a brief moment of hesitation and reflection, Sidney changes her mind and allows Tatum to keep the jacket, trying not to let her fears control the situation. Later, Tatum heads to school alongside her best friends, Chloe Parker and Hannah Thurman. Not long after, Ben shows up to pick them up. Meanwhile, Sidney spends her day managing the local cafe where she works. During her shift, she receives a visit from her neighbor, Jessica Bowden, who stops by with her son, Lucas. Curious about Sidney's past experiences with serial killers, Lucas hopes to interview her, which immediately creates discomfort. While Lucas steps aside, Jessica apologizes for her son's behavior, and the two women begin talking. Sidney admits she is uneasy about Tatum's growing curiosity regarding her past, a subject she is still not ready to revisit. Jessica, however, offers a different perspective, explaining that shielding children too much can leave them unprepared and that understanding danger may one day help them protect themselves. The story then moves to Tatum's school, where she takes part in a drama rehearsal. During practice, her performance is harshly criticized by the drama teacher, Mr. Willis, who complains that she lacks enthusiasm despite her role being nothing more than a dog. He unfairly compares her to her mother, pushing her to show the same intensity Sidney is known for, which leaves Tatum feeling embarrassed and frustrated. Later, Tatum shares a quiet moment with Ben, asking him to be completely honest about how he sees her. Ben responds with sincere compliments, reassuring her and boosting her confidence, making her feel valued and understood. Meanwhile, back at the cafe, Sidney receives a chilling phone call from Ghostface. At first, she remains calm, having faced threats like this before. However, the situation becomes far more disturbing when the caller switches to a video call, revealing a figure claiming to be Stu, somehow alive despite his supposed death years earlier. The man appears older, visibly scarred, and unsettlingly confident as he contacts her, even showing that he is standing outside Tatum's high school theater building. Realizing the danger is immediate, Sidney quickly calls Mark and rushes toward the school, fearing the worst. Back inside the school, Hannah is suspended high above the stage as part of the play's wire setup when Ghostface secretly enters the building. Moving through the theater unnoticed, the killer first attacks a backstage technician named Aaron, silently eliminating him before anyone realizes what is happening off-screen. Ghostface then turns his attention to Hannah, using the stage wires to manipulate and terrorize her as she helplessly swings above the set. The attacker cruelly toys with her before launching a brutal assault, throwing the theater into chaos. By the time the horrifying act is over, the stage has become a crime scene. Sidney arrives moments later and witnesses the devastating aftermath. She immediately attempts to stop the killer, firing her weapon, but Ghostface manages to escape before authorities can secure the area. Not long after, the police question Tatum and her friends, who are left deeply shaken and struggling to process Hannah's violent death. Mark pulls his wife aside and assures her they will find the person responsible, as well as the individual who called her, to determine whether it is truly Stu or just someone using deepfake technology. Back at home, Sidney urgently prepares to leave with Mark and Tatum, convinced that nowhere is truly safe anymore. At that very moment, Ghostface suddenly appears, having secretly entered the house through the attic. Before Sidney or Mark can react, the killer grabs Tatum and holds her at knife point, forcing her parents into a desperate standoff. Mark attempts to intervene, but is violently thrown down the stairs, leaving him unconscious. Thinking quickly, Sidney leads Tatum into a hidden safe room and secretly guides her through narrow passageways inside the walls in an attempt to get her out unnoticed. However, Ghostface realizes what is happening and begins stabbing through the walls, trying to reach them. In the struggle, Sidney manages to damage the killer's knife, forcing Ghostface to retreat momentarily. The confrontation spills outside into the street, where Sidney and Mark continue fighting back. Just then, a van suddenly crashes into Ghostface, driven by Gail, who arrives alongside her new interns, Chad and Mindy. After the chaos settles, Sidney and Gail Weathers reunite for the first time since Sidney chose to stay out of the recent New York killing spree. The moment is brief, as their attention quickly turns to the unmasked attacker lying before them. When they remove the mask, the killer is revealed to be a man named Carl Allen Gibbs, the same unsettling stranger Sidney previously noticed at the coffee shop. The discovery raises even more questions, as no one understands his connection to Sidney or why he specifically targeted her while pretending to be Stu to draw her back into the nightmare. As the investigation begins, Sidney and Gail learn that Gibbs had recently escaped from Fairbrook Psychiatric Hospital. Sidney becomes increasingly worried, knowing there is always more than one Ghostface involved. Later, while Sidney and Gail are talking inside, they receive a call from the so-called Stu, who mocks Gail for no longer having her job before threatening both of them. Soon after, Sidney and Gail travel to Fairbrook Psychiatric Hospital, where they meet an orderly named Marco. He guides them to Gibbs' former room and reacts immediately when shown a photo of Stu, recognizing the face as a patient known only as John Doe. According to Marco, the man suffered severe memory loss following a traumatic head injury. He explains that John Doe had previously been declared mentally unfit to stand trial and was released just 2 weeks earlier. Even more troubling, Marco reveals that John Doe and Carl Gibbs had formed a close friendship during their time at the facility. On their way out, Sidney and Gail devise a strategy to draw Stu into the open by arranging for Sidney to appear on live television for an interview with Gail. At the Evans house, Mark finds himself alone when a sudden noise catches his attention. As he investigates, Ghostface ambushes him, wrapping him in plastic and stabbing him repeatedly while he's distracted. Across town, the entire community is on high alert, aware that danger is closing in. Nearby, Tatum meets up with Chad and Mindy at the bar where Chloe works. With everyone now a potential suspect, Mindy lays out her theory about the killings. The killer is using nostalgia to target Sidney. She points out Lucas for his unsettling behavior, while Ben seems capable of creating a deepfake of Stu to manipulate Sidney. Essentially, everyone is a suspect. Meanwhile, Sidney takes her seat for the interview, watched closely by Tatum and her friends. Things quickly take a turn when Gail brings up Sidney's children, including the two staying with Mark's mother. Frustrated, Sidney cuts the interview short, but just then, Stu calls claiming he is outside the bar where Tatum is. Sidney rushes out, leaving everyone on edge. Ben insists on giving Tatum a ride in his car. While there, she discovers a video on his laptop showing a deepfake of Stu. Ben explains he created it to test whether he could replicate the same kind of deepfake being used to terrorize Sidney. However, Tatum does not believe him and immediately knocks him out before running for safety. Unfortunately, another Ghostface appears, forcing Tatum to run for her life. Suddenly, Chloe is ambushed by Ghostface in the kitchen. She tries to defend herself, but accidentally injures Chad in the shoulder. Ghostface then slashes Mindy in the stomach and spares the twins for the moment before returning to chase Chloe. Lucas is also attacked, and Ghostface brutally kills Chloe by dragging her across the bar, shattering glass and fatally wounding her with a shard. Meanwhile, Tatum flees into the deserted streets under curfew. Ben catches up and she apologizes for suspecting him, but before they can say more, Ghostface fatally stabs Ben. Tatum barely has time to process the shock before reaching Sidney's cafe, where she contacts her mother, who tells her there is a gun in the office. Using the cafe's security cameras, Sidney directs Tatum to shoot Ghostface through the walls, temporarily stopping him. When Tatum goes outside to investigate, she's attacked by the same Ghostface, and Sidney can do nothing but watch in horror as a second Ghostface appears and helps abduct her. Once Sidney reaches her office, the killer calls her, demanding that she come to her house to find them. When Sidney arrives, she discovers that Ghostface has been using AI to create videos of Stu, as well as previous killers like Nancy Loomis, Roman Bridger, and even Dewey to torment her. She then comes face to face with the first Ghostface, revealed to be Jessica, who was motivated by Sidney in her memoirs to stand up and fight. This drive pushed her to kill her abusive husband, and she feels betrayed that Sidney was not involved in the New York murders. Jessica reveals that she orchestrated everything to draw Sidney back and even admits that she killed her own son because he reminded her of his father. In this intense moment, Mark finally frees Tatum, giving her a chance to defend herself. Meanwhile, Sidney manages to take down Marco in a shocking turn. The chaos continues as Sidney goes after Jessica, engaging in a brutal and prolonged fight. Just when things seem hopeless, Tatum intervenes and fires at Jessica. Unfortunately, she does not land a fatal shot. As Jessica arises again for a final attack, Sidney and Tatum shoot her multiple times until she is finally defeated, her face torn apart in the process. After the battle, Mark is rushed to the hospital. Gail arrives with Chad and Mindy, both still alive, and shares an emotional reconciliation with Sidney, apologizing for her past actions. The film then comes to an end. Kindly subscribe for more horror recaps like this. Thanks for watching.